Clara Walsh never imagined that one day her life would be decided by a contract. She was a gentle soul, raised in the quiet town of Willow Creek, the only place she had ever called home. Every day she helped her father tend to the apple orchard behind their house, painted watercolor landscapes in her spare time, and dreamed of the crisp white walls of a gallery in a faraway city. To Clara, life was modest, but it held dreams, and it was peaceful. Until the harsh winter swept through town, destroying the entire crop and pushing her family to the edge of ruin. Her father, Earl Walsh, a quiet but kind man, had tried everything to hold things together. But without rain, there were no apples. And without apples, there was no money. The bank debts piled high and creditors began arriving at their doorstep. Clara had never seen her father kneel to anyone until that fateful day. A man from the city, well-dressed and cold-spoken, came with a strange proposal. A marriage. Not for love, but for necessity. If Clara agreed to marry Julian Hart, a wealthy reclusive tech entrepreneur, all the family's debts would vanish. The land would be safe, the house wouldn't be foreclosed, her father wouldn't have to sell everything he had ever worked for. Clara knew almost nothing about Julian Hart, other than the fragmented headlines. Eccentric genius, lives in isolation, no friends, never seen with a woman. But this man was offering the only lifeline that could save what she held dear. She could say no. She could pack up her dreams and leave. But she didn't. She couldn't. When her father took her hands in his calloused grip and whispered, "I'm sorry, but there's no other way," Clara understood. Her dreams had to give way to survival. And so, with trembling hands and a heavy heart, Clara Walsh stepped into a future she did not choose, with only the faint hope that sometimes the things we never wish for become the ones we cherish most. Julian Hart was unlike any man Clara had ever met. He wasn't one to smile easily, nor did he speak much. People called him a tech prodigy, the mind behind a global cybersecurity empire, but few knew he lived in near-total isolation in a lakeside estate deep in the mountains of Lakeboro, a place few dared to visit. No parties, no press. No one truly knew Julian, and it seemed he preferred it that way. Clara met him for the first time at a notary office. There were no flowers, no greetings, just a cold wooden table, stacks of legal documents, and blue ink waiting for signatures. Julian arrived 10 minutes late. He wore a simple charcoal gray suit, no tie, no watch. Tall, lean, and silent. The moment he entered, no introductions were necessary. His presence spoke for itself. Yet oddly, he didn't look at her. He merely gave a brief nod, then sat across from her, flipping through the documents like he was reviewing an investment proposal. No questions, no small talk. That detached efficiency left Clara breathless for a moment. But she reminded herself, this was what had been agreed. A marriage based on logic, not emotion. The lawyer read the clauses aloud. No expectation of physical intimacy. Clara heard that line and felt an odd sense of relief. Each party retains private living quarters. Julian nodded. Duration, indefinite unless mutually dissolved. Then came the signing. Julian went first. His pen strokes were firm and quick, like he was outlining a business merger. When the pen was handed to Clara, she paused. She looked at it, then at her own hands. Trembling, light as a dying autumn leaf, she signed, Clara Walsh. Soft, unsteady, unsure if the signature even looked like hers anymore. When it was done, Julian finally looked up. For the first time, he met her gaze. His eyes were gray, not cold as she had feared, but something deeper, like a storm locked inside. He spoke, "Thank you for agreeing. I know this isn't easy." Just one sentence, but Clara understood something then. This man wasn't heartless. He was simply shut off. And so without a ring, without a smile, without even the brush of a hand, Clara stepped out of that office legally married, yet never once called a wife in any affectionate sense. Their wedding took place on a Tuesday morning. No guests, no bells, not even fresh flowers. An old minister, a notary clerk, and two strangers stood before a cold altar in a tiny woodland chapel. That was all. Clara wore a soft cream dress with a high collar and long sleeves, the same dress her mother used to wear to Sunday service. Her hair was pinned low at the nape of her neck. No makeup, only a faint pink lipstick she had saved for a special day. But this day arrived in silence. Julian was already waiting at the altar, shoulders square, hands clasped in front of him. He didn't look at her as she walked in, and she hadn't expected him to. No one walked her down the aisle, just her own steps and the heavy thump of her heart. No music played, only the wind whispering through fogged window panes and the steady voice of the minister. We gather here today. Clara barely heard the vows. Everything drifted past her ears, hazy like smoke. When the minister said, "Julian Hart, do you take?" he replied, "I do." Calm, no hesitation, but no emotion either. Then came her turn. Every gaze, though only a few, turned toward her. Clara's throat tightened. She looked at Julian. He didn't urge her. He just watched, as if waiting for something real. She whispered, "I do." Soft as a breath, but enough to bind two strangers with a lifetime promise. There was no kiss. Julian merely extended his arm. Clara took it. Cold skin, cautious motion, and they walked out of the chapel together in silence, like two travelers passing each other in an empty station. She was his wife, but had never been a bride, and so began a new chapter, not with celebration, but with silence. Julian's home was unlike any place Clara had ever been. Nestled deep within the Lakeboro Mountains, the Hart estate was a masterpiece of modern architecture amid untouched wilderness. Glass walls, black steel, and pale stone stretched silently along the lake shore. From the outside, it looked like a sculpture. From the inside, it felt like a hollow shell, cold and lifeless. Clara was led to her section of the house, a private suite in the western wing, far from where Julian stayed. Elena, the sole elderly housekeeper, handed her a key and offered a gentle smile, though her eyes couldn't quite hide the curiosity. "Will you be all right, Mrs. Walsh?" "Clara," she replied. Just Clara. The first few days passed like fog. They had breakfast at different times. Julian rose early, often gone before Clara woke. She would eat alone in a quiet kitchen without a trace of warmth. Dinner was shared, per contract, but they merely sat across from each other, speaking of the weather, the gardens, or the books Clara wandered into in the house's sprawling maze-like library. Julian kept his distance. When offering her a drink, he placed it on the table rather than handing it directly. Once, during a brief walk by the lake, at Elena's suggestion, if Clara moved too close, Julian subtly stepped away, his eyes flickering with something unsettled. At first, Clara thought it was courtesy, but soon she realized it was fear. A fear without name, without logic. A fear that didn't come from her, but from something buried deep within him. On the 8th night, a storm rolled in. The wind howled outside. Thunder cracked like breaking skies. Clara curled beneath the covers, her heart pounding with the same childhood fear that never quite left. Memories of trees crashing on rooftops, of her mother's arms and lullabies. She couldn't bear it. Throwing on a robe, feet bare on the cold floor, Clara stepped into the dark hallway and moved toward the faint light spilling from under a door in the east wing. She didn't know what she was doing, didn't know how Julian would react, but she needed someone, a presence, even if silent. She raised her hand and knocked, once, then again. His voice came through rough but alert. "Who is it?" Clara took a breath and whispered, "It's me, Clara." The door opened slowly, creaking just slightly. Julian stood before her in dark gray sleepwear, hair tousled from bed, but his eyes were sharp and fully awake. He looked at her as if unsure whether she was truly standing there. "Are you all right?" His voice wasn't as dry as usual. It was laced with concern. Clara shook her head. I hate thunderstorms. Ever since I was a child. I know it sounds silly, but—" "No," Julian cut in, his voice low but gentler. "It's not silly at all." He stepped aside. "Come in." She entered his private space for the first time. It was simpler than she had imagined. No luxury, no excess, just a desk, a bookshelf, an armchair near the fireplace, a bed neatly made with gray sheets. Almost nothing personal. No photographs, no keepsakes. "You can sit wherever you like," he offered. Clara was about to sit by the window, but a lightning flash made her pull away. Julian noticed. "The bed? It's farther from the window," he suggested, a bit hesitant. "If you'd prefer." She nodded, gently taking a seat on the edge of the bed. He remained a few paces away, like he was the one unsure of his place in his own room. "Fear is a natural response," Clara said softly. "Do you have any fears?" Julian was silent for a long time before answering, being alone forever. She looked at him, not with judgment, but with the quiet understanding of someone truly listening. "Julian," she hesitated, "can I ask something personal?" He nodded slowly. "Why me? Why did you choose me?" He turned away, eyes fixed on the dark beyond the glass. "Because you didn't want this, like me. Because you didn't expect anything from me. No demands, no pressure. You weren't dangerous." Silence settled around them. Then he turned back to her. "You know, you're the first person to touch me, and I didn't want to run." Clara's hand tensed in her lap. Then, "Why are you afraid to be near me?" Julian swallowed. "Because I don't know how. I don't know how to be close to someone. I don't know how to love or touch without hurting. My father didn't allow crying, no hugs, no affection. I was raised like a project, not a child." His voice broke, like stones crumbling in a deep cavern. "I've never kissed anyone, Clara, never held hands, never let anyone this close." She rose, approaching slowly, as if moving toward a wounded bird. "I won't touch you unless you want me to." Julian looked at her, his eyes filled with 100 things he had never spoken. "Would you like to try?" she asked, just a small touch. He nodded. "Barely." Clara reached out, hesitant, and gently placed her fingertips on the fabric of his sleeve. His skin was cool, his muscles tight, but he didn't flinch. "See?" she whispered. "Not as bad as you feared." Julian looked down where her fingers rested, then looked up at her again. This time, his gray eyes were no longer just a storm. They were the sky after it. "It's the first time," he said, "and I don't want it to be the last." After that night, something changed. Not loudly, not suddenly, just a soft shift, real and gentle, like the arrival of autumn. No one sees the exact moment it comes, but by morning, the leaves have turned. Julian began appearing more often. He no longer avoided her. No more unconscious steps back when she approached. Instead, he quietly made 2 cups of coffee each morning, placing one at the seat across from Clara, the seat that used to remain empty. One afternoon he asked, "Would you like to see the library? I have a few books on Italian painting." Clara said yes, not for the books, but for the invitation. They walked the sunlit hallway side by side, like 2 people learning how to talk again. In the library, she discovered a rare art volume, Monet, Degas, Turner. Julian watched her eyes light up, and for the first time, he smiled without hiding it. A few days later, Clara woke to an unfamiliar sound. When she opened her door, she found a small wooden basket waiting. Inside were new paintbrushes, watercolor paper, and a handwritten note. "In case you still want to paint." No name, but she knew who it was from. That day, for the first time in years, Clara sat by her window and began to paint again. She didn't know what she was painting, just colors, movement, feeling, but her hands no longer trembled. When Julian saw the first piece, he stood in front of it for a long time, silent. Then he whispered, "It feels like freedom." Clara looked at him. "That's something I never thought I'd feel in this house." Julian lowered his gaze, his voice barely audible. "Me neither." Clara had never stepped into Julian's world. She lived in it, yes, but always on the edge of a space that never quite made room for her, until the day he said, "I have a short meeting at the office in the city. If you'd like to come, I'd be glad." Clara was surprised, but she nodded. The car took them into the heart of the city, where everything seemed made of steel, glass, and urgency. Julian's office occupied the top 3 floors of a towering skyscraper. The elevator opened to black wood panels, reflective surfaces, and people dressed so precisely they looked automated. Julian left her in his private office. "There are books, tea. I won't be long," he smiled. A small, real one. Clara sat by the window, gazing down at the city like observing another planet through a pane of glass. She was flipping through a magazine when voices echoed from the hallway. "She's actually here?" A woman's voice, scoffing. "Yeah, Hart's new wife. Looks like she stepped out of a barn. Probably thinks she won the lottery. Or got bought like a doll. Word is, he doesn't even touch women. Maybe she's just quiet and obedient, like furniture." Clara froze. Her eyes no longer saw the page. Each sentence pierced her chest like a needle. They spoke of her as if she had no soul, as if she were an object. She didn't know how long she sat there until Julian returned and saw the stiffness in her face. "What happened?" he asked immediately. Clara told him, every word, every cruel laugh, every imagined glance. Julian stood, his eyes darkening. "I can't control what people say," he said quietly, "but that doesn't mean I don't want to." She looked at him, voice thick. "They're right. I'm just a girl from a farm. I don't belong here." Julian stepped forward, now close. "Look at me," he said, voice like cracking stone. "What do you see?" Clara didn't answer. "I see a brave woman, the only one who didn't run when I told her the most shameful part of me, the only person who touched me without expecting anything in return." His voice broke. "They're right about one thing. You don't belong in their world. You're better than it." That afternoon, after returning from the city, Julian didn't go inside right away. Instead, he walked straight to the back garden, the place where Clara often sat sketching unnamed pieces. Clara saw him from a distance. She set her brush down, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked toward him. They said nothing at first, just stood there, under the fading light, as if the world had gone quiet to make room for something about to unfold. "Are you angry?" Julian asked. "No," she said. "But I'm tired of always having to prove I belong." He nodded, eyes never leaving hers. "I don't want you to prove anything." "Then I need to know," Clara said softly, "that what we have is real, not just a contract, not just an agreement." Julian looked down. "I don't know what love is supposed to be. I only know every time you leave the room, I feel empty." Clara took a step closer. "Love starts in small ways. No one knows how to love perfectly from the beginning, but I think maybe we're learning." She lifted her hand and gently touched his cheek. He didn't flinch. He only closed his eyes, trembling slightly, as if feeling for the first time a touch that didn't carry fear. "May I kiss you?" she asked, tenderly. Julian opened his eyes, surprised, and then nodded. Clara leaned in. The kiss landed like a breeze, unhurried, unpracticed, imperfect, but real. A quiet moment between two souls learning how to trust gentleness. When she pulled away, Julian looked at her as if the world had shifted. "That was?" he asked. "A first kiss," Clara smiled. "For both of us." Julian whispered, "It wasn't like I imagined." "No," she tilted her head. "No, it was better." 1 week after their first kiss, Julian told her, "I want to show you something." Clara didn't ask, she simply nodded. They left early, driving through the winding roads of Lake Burrow, where fog still clung to pine peaks and forest birds had yet to rise. When the car stopped, they stood before a small wooden cabin nestled in a valley. A vineyard stretched to the horizon, and a stream murmured softly nearby. "I used to come here as a child," Julian said. It's the only place I ever felt like myself." Clara stepped out, standing in the golden sun and scent of damp leaves. Everything was peaceful, untouched. They spoke no words for a while, just the wind, the earth, and their shared presence. Then Julian turned to her, eyes steady but uncertain. "Clara," he said, voice trembling like a first confession, eyes tracing the morning mist on the vineyard. "I know everything between us began as a deal. I never thought I'd one day propose to you, for real, not because of clauses or debt, but because I choose you." Clara didn't speak. Her eyes brimmed. Julian knelt. No flowers, no ring, no lights, just soft ground and an open heart. "I can't promise I'll get everything right, but I promise I'll learn with you. I want us to begin again, truly, as husband and wife, not out of obligation, but because we both want to." Clara knelt too, her hands found his. "We've lived together as strangers," she said. "Now I want to live with you as people learning how to love." Julian smiled, small, rare, but real. That same day, they returned to Willow Creek, the old town where all dreams began. Julian asked to speak with Clara's father, Earl, who still wore guilt like an old coat. "I didn't save my daughter," he said. Julian replied, "No, she saved me." Earl nodded. "Then hold on to that with both hands." Julian squeezed Clara's hand, and this time there was no fear in the grip. Their second wedding took place in a place Clara had once dreamed of a different life. A small chapel by the lake in Willow Creek, wrapped in wildflowers and late spring sunlight. There was no grand guest list, just a few souls who truly knew them. Her father, Elena the housekeeper, and an old couple from the neighboring farm who used to deliver milk when Clara was little. Clara wore a simple ivory dress, her hair loose, no veil. Julian stood beneath a wooden arch laced with vines, wearing a light-colored suit for the first time, his gaze steady and open. When Clara walked down the aisle, Julian smiled, not out of duty, not for formality, but from the quiet joy of waiting for her. They stood before each other, no officiant prompting their words. Julian spoke first, his voice deep and steady. "I once believed I would go through life never truly being touched, but you did that, with gentleness, with courage, and with the way you look at me as if I'm worth loving." Clara held his hands and softly replied, "I don't know what the future holds, but today I choose you, not because I have to, but because I want to." No one cried, but everyone's eyes glistened. This time, when they kissed, there was no hesitation, no unfamiliarity, just two people who had learned how to love in their own way. A vow spoken, not from a contract, but from the heart. 3 years after their second wedding, the house by the lake was no longer silent with solitude. Where wind once echoed through glass halls, now came the bright, bell-like laughter of a small girl with chestnut hair and almond-bright eyes. Her name was Elodie, a name Julian chose, from French, meaning abundance. "Because she's filled up my life," he had said once, cradling her to sleep. Clara often watched Julian from afar, sitting cross-legged on the floor, letting Elodie climb over his shoulders, tug his hair, giggling endlessly. The man who once flinched at a touch now wrapped his arms around a whole universe. Elodie wasn't afraid of thunder. In fact, every time rain came, she ran to the balcony, arms outstretched, shouting, "Daddy, it's raining, let's go dance." Julian hesitated the first time, unsure whether his world of code and control had space for barefoot chaos. But then he smiled, a smile that had grown easier with time, and stepped out, letting her spin circles with him under the early summer downpour, as if the world had never known darkness. One night, Clara was journaling when Elodie stirred from a dream. She went to check, but found Julian already there, sitting beside the bed, gently patting her back, whispering lullabies in that once corporate voice of his. "Daddy's here, it's all right, close your eyes, sweetheart." Clara stood in the doorway, her heart softening. Julian looked up and smiled at her, quiet and warm. "It's strange," he whispered. I never really had a home, but now, with her, with you, I feel like I've been born again." Clara walked over, sat beside him. "Me too," she said. "We didn't start with love, but maybe that's why our love has roots so deep." They looked at their daughter, peaceful in sleep, lips still curved from afternoon laughter. Outside, the rain fell again, not as fear, but as a lullaby of this new life. A life not perfect, but chosen, and in that choice they had found everything they never thought they deserved.